a greater campus for greater LA. We are so excited that you are joining us. And again, you are attending UCLA, a greater campus for greater LA. You will be receiving one LU HSW approved for attending. And this meeting is being recorded, and we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel after the meeting. Of course, recording your attendance, and we will get that off to Steve Tanner, who's our membership director, so that you will receive your credit after this is over. And we will also be putting the link to this video on the event page. So look out for that so that you can refer back to it. And so thank you very much for attending this event. And I'm going to now pass it over to Gabriel Cervantes to introduce everybody.
All right. Thank you, Erica. And thank you all for joining today, particularly given these challenging times. Again, my name is Gabriel Cervantes, co-chair of the AI Los Angeles Historic Resources Committee. I'm here along with Justine Leong and Marcelo Franjanillo. We're a committee focused on bridging the past and the future through adaptive reuse. Today's 1-hour event is UCLA, a greater campus for greater LA, and it's being presented by Todd Lynch and John D'Amico from UCLA, and they'll be introducing themselves in a moment. And if you have any questions, please provide them in the chat. I believe we're planning like a midway point. We're going to answer questions and also spend the last 10 minutes addressing any questions. So with that, Todd and John, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel, and thank you again to the committee for the invitation to present. It's an honor to do so, and before we get started, I also just want to acknowledge the immensity of the catastrophe that people have been living through, and so many have been affected, and I want to say that we hold all of them in our hearts and hope for improvements in coming days. So in any case, my name is Todd Lynch. I'm a principal project planner with Capital Programs. My focus is especially on campus planning and sustainability, our green buildings program, and our LEED certifications on campus. And I work with projects both on and off campus to make sure that they're meeting the sustainability criteria for Cal Green, for LEED, and other programs to realize their sort of full potential. And John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John D'Amico. I'm a principal project manager at Capital Programs. Have been working there for nearly 25 years. I started working on a project in what we used to call off campus, which is now called not on campus in Santa Monica, and moved to other projects that were separate from the UCLA main campus through most of my career. I have some local government experience as well, and I think what you'll hear during our presentation is how the university has its own set of standards, but also likes to be a good neighbor during those projects. And with that, Todd, I think you have the next piece of this.
Okay, so this discussion is really about the context of the growth of UCLA's original campus to be something larger and more expansive than it had been. Really, we have over the history of UCLA's existence, it's always been sort of starting off in new places, even from its earliest days in 1929. This is a view of the original campus in Westwood when the entire area was a kind of clear and open hillside. And you can see the images of Royce and Powell under construction at that point. So we have a very established building stock of our own on campus that's more than 100 years old now. And for most of the time that the campus has existed up until about the 21st century, the campus was, primarily focused largely to the Westwood campus. It kept growing from the area in the upper right-hand corner that you just saw in the aerial photo to, the boundaries, the main campus that are known today, 419 acres and a roughly 60,000 daily population. But as different programs and different research projects and activities have taken university actions out further into the community. Those kind of touch points have increased, and increasingly UCLA is engaging areas really throughout the region, downtown, in Westlake, West Adams, in the Culver City area, certainly close to the main campus here in Westwood, Santa Monica, Marina del Rey, and so on. And that has only, excuse me, increased in size. Some of the examples that just on the map are the William Andrews Clark Memorial Library, which is one of the oldest historic properties and actually predates the main campus itself. That's long been an off-campus property that's required a certain amount of adaptive reuse and updating over its life, including the addition of an elevator, a new core and access, and a full renovation of the interiors by ARG. And then, of course, the very prominent Santa Monica Medical Center, which was a new building, but a strong example of UCLA's presence sort of beyond its campus boundaries. And that's really about the kind of outreach of the university and its academic mission into the community, and really trying to make LA a better place, a healthier place, a safer place, and a more culturally rich place. And so that plus the academic programs and the large workforce that we have has also meant that our campus kind of extents really stretch quite far beyond the campus borders, or really beyond LA County. There are more than 910 individuals who are would if they were commuting to campus would be considered an extreme commuter distance. And so the kind of Bruin family really does extend very, very far into throughout Southern California. So with some of the newer acquisitions that UCLA has made in recent years, there have that kind of main campus footprint has expanded even further. And then we have the new South Bay campus, we have the downtown LA building, the Trust Building, and other settings that we're going to speak more about as well. But in context, so a couple of these, just as an example, all of these locations where we are engaging a new neighborhood or a new location, we're always dealing with an existing context, an existing set of conditions that we have to respond to. Frequently, it's that a building has been has come to the campus in one way or another, or has been occupied by a program, and then becomes part of the campus formally, as happened here with the Lawson Worker Justice Center, which is a renovation undergoing right now by Johnston Mark Lee. And that building was a historic resource itself on Parkview, and it required more of an update than an adaptation, really, in this case, sort of repairs and improvements to the building, renaming and generally improving all of the conditions of the envelope of the interior and new systems. So a thorough refresh on buildings, and that kind of bundling of bundling of improvements is a strategy that's been widely used on our campus. Same sort of thing that will be applied for the Trust Building going forward. This was a building that had been very recently given a fairly thorough renovation by the previous owner, and so that has been a case where we won't have as much to do necessarily to the main kind of building structure, but there's a lot of space there to kind of reorganize and determine how best to adapt our programs to fit within it. And there are a number of community outreach kinds of programs that are planned to go in there, programs for education for incarcerated individuals, labor and employment programs, programs that engage the housing and the homeless and immigration, issues of public health and voting rights, and issues of climate change and environmental justice, and so on. So there will also be, I believe, more community-focused arts and cultural projects that are going to be in that building as well, and the kind of the mix of occupants is still being determined, and I have to find where my screen has gone. There we go. Sorry. But it's a wonderful historic resource of a building and a beautiful new presence downtown for UCLA to be able to offer to a much wider community, much more conveniently. Also, the links with the coming metro link that will extend all the way down Wilshire to the campus from downtown is going to help facilitate that even further. So, but as I was starting to mention, a number of these strategies of adaptive reuse and really enhancing buildings as we restore them is a strategy that we've had to engage because of the age of the campus, right? With so many of our existing buildings having a just a lifespan that goes well beyond the lifespans of the systems that they inhabit, or certainly the programs that they have meant that a lot of buildings have to be reimagined and reevaluated. And by and large, a lot of them are really very capable of adapting to new occupancies and new functions, as long as the fit and the flexibility can be made. So an example here is one of our first LEED Platinum projects, Myra Hershey Hall on the east side of campus, which used to be a women's dormitory. One of the taller wings at the back was removed to allow for the Terasaki Life Sciences building to be constructed, and the buildings inside were converted from dormitories into office use, and created sort of a very nice front facade to the Hillgards neighborhood, and then also a beautiful restored courtyard that's inside. So but this was a very thorough soup to nuts seismic renovation, roof replacement, repairs of finishes, reorganization inside, and thorough system upgrades, and all of those things, plus the restoration of the building itself contributed to that LEED Platinum rating. In many cases, the existing building stock has a lot more life left in it, but it requires more preservation and conservation. So two other recent examples by co-architects that are on campus that really did this very well. Both are LEED Platinum level projects, and more than exceeded our UC campus policy requirement to be LEED Gold or better. But a number of the strategies that we use to apply that is for our existing buildings is the application of the energy use intensity metric, where the energy use of a building per square foot is determined and evaluated in comparison to a 1990 level building on our campus location with that same building type, right? So we have three different categories that are defined for office or administrative spaces or academic spaces, housing, and also intensive laboratory or medical spaces. And those three categories give us a kind of baseline to work against, and all of the UC properties work with that. So in the case of the now Pritzker Hall, formerly Franz Hall, as you see on the right side here, that process of evaluation went through a very extensive evaluation of the seismic stability of the psychology complex, and also the organization and the kind of program effectiveness. And even though to the outside, Pritzker Hall looks very, very unchanged from its historic original appearance, the addition of very well integrated seismic reinforcement, both behind the gridded envelope and within the arcade, allowed for the size of the interior space, welcoming space, to be much grander, and a thorough upgrade of interior spaces to be more flexible, less idiosyncratic, and also to allow more daylight and much more beautiful interior spaces. So that kind of taking a building from its previous incarnation to basically restore it from the core to the perimeter, and to do that in a way that's also careful about the use and waste of materials, is something that's very important to us. And just to point out that the two buildings are just flagged there, are two of the campus projects by Paul Revere Williams of AA Gold fame, and an important architect here in Los Angeles. One of the discoveries made along the way in that process was the restoration of a mural that was intended to go into the lobby space of the Botany Building. Sorry, the Botany Building is the one on the lower part of the screen here. The entryway, this was never built, but it was in the design drawings and was discovered in the process, and then realized by an artist, contemporary artist working today. So, but those kinds of bundled building improvements that we try to work with, sort of approach the many different policy requirements of the UC in a kind of holistic fashion. We attempt seismic strengthening without trying to overtake the architectural expression of the building, try to do things subtly and as minimally invasively as we can. We usually have existing programs that we're trying to work around to some degree, and we don't have a lot of places to push people to other locations. We're also fully retrofitting all the different systems in that situation, and through those actions, we're preserving embodied carbon, we're preserving the heritage of the campus, and we're also making things more accessible and more functional. So all of that sort of extends the useful life of the building far into the future, and it kind of just it renews the cycle and allows for, in many cases, the buildings to be much more useful than even in their original incarnation, in the form of the number of people that can use it and the kinds of things that can be done. So with that, I'm going to take a moment, and if there are any questions, we can answer a few of those, but I'm also going to pass it along to John, who's going to take a deeper dive into some of the kind of case studies of two of the buildings recently completed off campus.
Thanks, Todd. Are there any questions? I think we were going to look to the chat to see if there were any there. My family is doing fine, thank you. I don't know if there are any specific to what Todd covered. But the two projects I'm going to talk about are the Margot Levin Graduate Art Studios. That is a project in Culver City, building purchased in the early 80s by the university, and then renovated starting in 2018 and 2017, with some early design work done by Johnston Markley, and as much earlier in 2011. The other project is the Nimoy Theater, which was purchased in 2019 and renovated during COVID. So the first building, this Warner building, as it says there, was purchased by UCLA in 1983 in the Hayden Tract. You can go to the next slide. It was a fairly pedestrian warehouse that had some railroad tracks running by it that had since been abandoned and then taken out. And then the city of Culver City paved the railroad area behind it and put in some parking as the Hayden Tract became more popular. This is a bowstring truss studio building, what Johnston Markley very, very smartly and pretty much right from the beginning, and working with Margot Levin, the main donor of the building, decided to fill the entire site with interior and exterior spaces so that the students and faculty, visitors even, could enter the space and be in a garden in one area, be in a workshop in another area, be in a studio in another area, a gallery in another area, et cetera, et cetera, to really sort of make it a complex of the arts and with some relaxation spaces. And I think you'll see more of that as we move on. This is one of those covered unenclosed spaces that is not mechanically heated or cooled and serves as a workshop area. Next has a polycarbonate skylight. This is the entrance sequence. It has a small garden in there, and since the building has added some tables and chairs for students to enjoy some relaxation time, and right off that is a small kitchen for them to prepare food or coffee, etc. This is the loading dock and another covered unenclosed space, and to the right and to the left are interior spaces that have both a CNC machine and some wood shop areas, and on the other side some kilns. Go ahead, Todd. Here is thank you. Here is another look of the interior garden and the entrance from the inside. Next slide. And then this is one of the student studios. And before we leave this slide, I just want to point out that the original boat truss building was at the time that we started the renovation, it was no longer occupiable by UCLA faculty or students. And it was seismically unstable. And so there's a significant amount of seismic work that happened, sort of recreating the boat truss system and the perimeter of the building, as well as shotcreting some walls between the new building and the existing building. Go to the next slide. Here's more of the interior of the original boat truss building. It had 8x8 columns supporting the boat truss system. Most of those had to be replaced and reinforced. And as you can see, the reinforcing steel that also trailed below and within the boat truss system. The next slide. So the project used three types of concrete. It used tilt up, cast in place, and shotcrete. And what Johnston Markley selected was a sort of pillowed tilt up walls. And these are some of the examples of the rebar within those tilt up slabs. And there's some follow-on photos showing those being lifted into place around the perimeter. Here's some more of that. And all of this was done on site. It was a fairly constricted site. And so they did a series of tilt-up slabs, and then they did the second set of tilt-up slabs to finish the entire building. In between those open spaces were cast-in-place columns that connected to the tilt-up slabs around the perimeter of the new building. On the photo on the right, you can see some of the cast-in-place and shotcrete areas next to the original structure. Next slide. Next slide. So you can see at exactly the property line, this was installed, and maybe this is a good time to sort of mention that. So the university has its own building official, and we have our own planning department. And so though cities, of course, have building departments and planning departments, the university plans the building for the most viable and best use case for the use of the site. So often we build directly to the property line, and not always do we follow all of the city's written zoning code because we are a state agency, but we are good neighbors and we do try to uh, work as much as possible with them to explain why we're proceeding in the way we are, what is the eventual use, how we are preparing buildings that are um, have much less effect on the environment, mitigate their own traffic, and ultimately are much safer and accessible buildings overall. But there are plenty of examples of the local government, the local utility, having some stretching to do in order to understand our purposeful rehabilitation or new construction on the sites. Next slide, Todd. Here's another example of sort of putting these panels up right next to some high voltage electrical wires. This work, by the way, was done by Abbott Construction. They were a particularly good contractor in this context, having done a lot of urban infill work and further understanding and working within our system of contracts, which is not always the most user-friendly. I'm sure some contractors would be happy to tell you that. This is a particularly nice piece of this project, was a slide later showing it, but this is a sort of cantilevered edge that Johnston Markley, there we go. And it's quite beautiful, sort of floating up there above the entrance to the building. And that
Hey,
also is a covered unenclosed area of the project.
and John and Todd, we're at the 12:30 mark.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great.
Terrific. Next slide. Keep going. These are just some more interior pieces. This is some cast in place concrete between the shotcrete and the tilt up. More, Todd. And these are some interior slides. As I said, there was not much site, so this was them preparing the boat truss for the new structure inside the boat truss building of the old structure. Go ahead, Todd. More cast in place concrete with the new boat truss system going up. And finally, the entire project. And as you can see, the sort of lower one-story piece of the existing building, and then the two-story piece with the covered unenclosed areas. Right there is a little view into an apartment that is on site. Also not allowed by the zoning of the Hayden tract, but the university felt committed to having an on-site apartment for visiting artists to work over a semester or a weekend or a week with students who are working in there. And finally, just a detail of the corner and the top of that pillar construction, some of the covered unenclosed space with the polycarbonate roof going in. Next slide. Interior of the studio spaces themselves, sort of finished at one level, and then they begin to be unfinished as they get up to the unfinished boat truss ceiling. There's the letters on the ground, making sure the words are spelled correctly, and then here's a picture from the inside, the last one of the finished garden with her Margot Levin's name going up. And I think most people, or many, would know that Margot Levin was an important figure in the art world in Los Angeles from the 60s on. She was a graduate student of the UCLA Graduate Art Studios program. She was an artist for a while and then went on to have a famous gallery that featured many UCLA and other California artists. Margot sadly died in 2022, but after we finished her studio building, which she was very happy with. And like many of these projects that have a named donor, they're very ambitious. They often come with dollars for student services after the work itself is done, but it also means that there's a substantial contribution from the campus. And in this case, the total project cost with the donor and the campus was about $30 million. Next slide. The Nimoy Theater. Susan Bay Nimoy, an important director and head of the Leonard Nimoy Foundation, made a $21 million donation to the university, $7 million to acquire the building, $7 million for the renovation, and $7 million for future efforts by faculty, staff, and students to fill the theater with works. You may know about Susan Bay Nimoy that she was one of, I believe they were called the Studio Seven, the original six, sorry, the original six female directors who, along with the Directors Guild, sued the motion picture industry because of their lack of female directors employed. And this happened in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It was a California Supreme Court case that ultimately the Directors Guild and the women who filed the suit lost, but it helped to begin the change of using more and more women directors in film. Susan was married to her famous husband, Leonard, and you'll see some indication of that near the end of this show. But the theater itself, and this is the finished version with an enlarged foyer with many of the original historic details protected, the light, the mural on the ceiling, the sort of trompe-l'oeil of the mirrored panels that extend the mural. This work was done by the Disney Corporation in the 1980s. Next slide. The theater famously had a 410-foot long mural that was supposed to represent the 1920s Los Angeles, as if you were sitting in a garden with a garden wall, and outside the wall was the lit up Los Angeles while you were in the theater watching a movie. Next slide. There's more of it in our own renovation. The university and CAP UCLA wanted to put in raised seating, so the seating, as you can see, goes up on a tiered platform, and then there's some seating along the ground that's also on less severely tiered platforms. The ceiling itself, during its Disney heyday, had a Tinkerbell light show. We were not able to maintain that, but there's some indication of it in the sound locks at the entrance to the theater. Next slide, Todd. One highlight, to go back to that restroom, one highlight is this was the first project at the UCLA campus to have gender neutral restrooms with a row of sinks. It took quite some, it was working with our own building official. We moved the university, or at least capital programs, and UCLA into the 21st century with restroom design, though of course many of us know that cities across LA County have been employing this for many decades. But we got this to happen at UCLA, and it's since become a standard where appropriate. Next slide. So this theater was initially built in the 1940s by the Fonda family. Jane Fonda's mother, Peter Fonda's wife, she built this. It was originally called the UCLA Theater, and UCLA sued them and said, "We're UCLA, you're not UCLA," so they added an N and called it the UCLan Theater, which is what it is. But this was an 11,000 square foot performance theater that in around the 1950s was changed to a movie theater. And in the 1980s, and this is the Disneyfication of it, it was turned into a 410 seat theater. Next slide, please. Here's the concession stand. There's the seats and the mural, which in this lighting and this photo doesn't really make it look like an actual place, but it was quite the place in the 1980s when it was finished. And it was the it was the practice run for the theater that Disney eventually renovated along Hollywood Boulevard, doing pretty much the same thing. Next slide. Here are some additional shots, and there's a little slightly better picture of the original theater with its seats and nighttime sort of idea of being in a garden with the city beyond. The Nimoy Theater currently operates with CAP UCLA performances. There's more than 150 performance nights every year, and it is a fully 21st century performance venue with a very sophisticated AV system. It's the very first all-electric building at UCLA. It is seismically safe. It is accessible from the front door to the back. So if a person is in the audience and is called up on stage, they can be easily end up on stage and exit through the back if they need to. These are all the things that I think Todd alluded to, and the university proudly achieves in every building, that these are just really smart buildings. They are fully accessible. They really take advantage of maintaining their historic nature when appropriate, or in this case, even though it was built in 1940, it was the 1980s renovation by Disney that was deemed historic, and the university was committed to keeping that as part of its collection of buildings as a historic building within the community. I think that's it. Next slide. There we go. Oh, there's more. Oh, next slide.
Yeah.
There's a picture of what
some of the construction things.
yes,
Yeah.
there's a picture of what the condition was when we purchased it. It had been run into by many trucks. That's the sort of Disney back of the marquee, paper thin, but it does do its job as a marquee. The next slide. There's a picture of the mural and the soundproofing below it. It was actually painted on canvas and hung with a 1x6 nailer and a staple gun by the Disney renovators. To the screen right, you can see the sort of salmon and yellow and gold and purple detailing. Much of that is sort of very typical off-the-shelf moldings that you might find at Home Depot that are gussied up and attached to sort of create the environment that Disney wanted. It's a picture of the interior and the structure and the bow truss structure that was upgraded. Some of the next slide. Some of the joists, I think it's in the next slide, Todd, were there was a fire in the theater, and we did not know that until we took the roof off, because it was covered up with drywall. So much of that had to be replaced. And I think in many ways, that has been the story of many of these buildings that the university has purchased, that though they were perhaps and quite nice at the time of their construction, they were not attended to very well. Here's a picture of the main entrance, and the Disney Corporation installed that set of doors across what had been an exterior slab on grade without any footings whatsoever. So we dug that up, and then we discovered that they had done that in many areas, and that the building itself did not have many footings from the 1940s, and that the slab was not connected to the walls, and the walls were not connected to the bow truss system. And so what we believe would be a fairly simple seismic renovation turned into an additional $1 million+ of seismic work. Next slide. There's the Nimoy Theater from above. So you can find it on Google Earth. And there's the exit in honor of Susan's husband, Leonard, live long and prosper, which is in many ways the narrative of late stage capitalism, but nonetheless, there it is. And there's the Nimoy Theater at the back for the artist's entrance.
So, yeah, so obviously, every time we go into a new location or a new setting, there are, as John was saying, many different conditions that need to be addressed, evaluated, thoroughly studied, sometimes abated, sometimes replaced, and then usually also strengthened and upgraded. So even in buildings that are of relatively recent vintage, many of the buildings that we have been working on lately are as recent as the 80s or the 90s in their construction, and then they still require a significant amount of upgrade and improvement just to meet code requirements, let alone go to the standards that the UC imposes. So just to wrap things up, I'm going to point to a few of the other new directions that are coming for the greater UCLA, starting with the South Bay campus, which is an important addition to the southern region of LA, and that is a new 24.5 acre plus 11 acre residential site campus that formerly had been Marymount California University in Rancho Palos Verdes. The complex of buildings there is going to be housing different kinds of investigations focused on sustainability, climate change, and environmental justice, among others. There have been Summer Institutes and a few others, but they also have a phenomenal proximity to the Pacific and a beautiful view. It's going to be an excellent way for the campus to extend its geographic reach and convenience to many of the people who would be using UCLA academic programs or potential students, faculty, and staff, as well as dedicated research. So that's one example, probably at the furthest distance. Again, returning to the Trust Building, which is going to be increasingly fitted out and programmed at various levels. There is a current UCLA-wide strategic plan that is looking from 2023 to 2028, and the components and elements inside there are going to be evaluated. I'm going to do a little plug for City Lab at the UCLA Department of Architecture and Design, where I also teach, and I know there's some on the call from City Lab who are going to be helping to look at occupancies and synergies in other cultural and social ways that the campus can improve outreach in downtown Los Angeles. And then one of the other very large buildings, but very relatively close to campus, 2 miles away from the main Westwood campus, is the new Research Park, which is formerly the West Side Pavilion shopping mall, then was retrofit to become an office building and a headquarters for Google, and then has been more recently acquired by UCLA when Google went to a more remote condition for many of its office functions. In any case, this facility with its really large spaces, very high kind of retail scale shopping spaces and so on, will be housing 700,000 square feet of programming in the Center for the Quantum Science, and also the California Institute for Immunology and sort of immunotherapy, as well as potentially other research-focused and dedicated investigations. There are synergies between those two programs, and there are others that, again, as part of the strategic plan and review process, are going to be evaluated. This project is probably going to have multiple phases or various subdivision projects that may be developed as the occupancy progresses. And I know that there are many architects on the call who would be interested in partnering with UCLA, working on our projects. And I would just encourage you to keep a lookout for capital programs advertising. We always post projects and requests for proposals and qualifications. But yes, so Research Park is definitely going to be one there. And then there's also quite a lot of activity on the UCLA Health side, through the medical center and the health program. And John, I'm going to just let you say a word or two about that project since this is.
Sure. The university purchased what used to be Olympia Medical Center and the associated medical office building and parking. The medical center is 175,000 square feet, and that is being renovated currently into 104 bed plus other services neuropsychiatric hospital, so that the current neuropsych hospital on campus could be moved here, and that could be renovated for additional medical beds. The medical enterprise has several hundred practices and offices around Southern California. They also recently purchased a hospital in the valley and are looking at yet another hospital west and north of Santa Monica, perhaps, to expand the number of medical beds in Southern California. Here's a picture of the project currently under construction. It's designed by HOK. McCarthy is the design build contractor.
And it's yes, so as John was saying, there are many locations where UCLA Health has a presence or is also fitting out remodeling clinics or medical office locations, and that growth and integration within communities and neighborhoods is just going to continue. And then just as a final note, regarding sustainability and the value of adaptive reuse, obviously the most sustainable building is the building you don't have to build, right? And so if you can work with existing infrastructure, rehabilitate things that are there, there are many historical opportunities that or buildings that were built away that we wouldn't be able to build today, even alongside some of the seismic strengthening requirements and things that we have to deal with. But just in terms of qualities and functions and ceilings and things like that we don't see in contemporary construction in nearly as the same level these days. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up and ask if there are any questions. John or I can speak to that, but thank you very much for joining the presentation today. So John, do you want to elaborate on the hospital west of Santa Monica?
Elaborate on what did you say, Todd?
Oh, sorry, the question in the chat, is it possible to elaborate on which hospital you're referring to west of Santa Monica?
Well, I think the university is looking at a site to build a hospital from the ground up, somewhere in the Northwest Valley or in Malibu.
John, go ahead.
Yes, my question is concerning your adaptive reuse for historic buildings. Are your buildings federally designated for historic properties on your campus?
So the properties on the campus are reviewed for their historic eligibility. The campus itself is sort of designated a landmark as such, I believe, but the individual registrations building by building are not necessarily registered. There are some of the very oldest campus buildings, of the sort that we saw at the very beginning, Royce and Powell and Kaplan Hall and so on, are considered a resource, I believe. But the planning of the central part of the campus is treated as a sort of historical preserve historical preserve and is any renovation has to meet various campus standard criteria in order to do that. So,
And John,
Okay.
I would also add that for example, the Nimoy Theater is designated by the city of Los Angeles, not by the state and not by the federal government. That we
Okay.
follow the Secretary of Interior standards in that renovation. For example, also where the Hammer Museum is, the former Occidental tower, that's also not historically designated, but as Todd said, it was renovated following the Secretary of the Interior standards, working with Page and Turnbull. The medical center, the Santa Monica Medical Center, that had some very minor historic pieces because it was built in 1956. And again, it was not designated, but those were evaluated and treated as such. And so that is typical for even the Botany Building and the Pritzker Building that was shown earlier by Todd. Those are clearly terrific historic buildings and examples, but they are not designated officially. And yet the university worked very closely with Page and Turnbull to make sure that the standards were met for the Secretary of the Interior's standards for maintaining a historic building.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So you meet the requirements, but you don't go through the federal approval. So that's good to know. Thank you.
There was another question in the chat.
George, okay. Sorry, question from Bro Happel, George Riley. Assuming all the campus projects will be fully electric going forward in line with wider UC goals, that's correct. We are there's a UC policy that restricts any fossil fuel use for heating water or space. And the Nimoy, also the Sunset Canyon Recreation Center replacement, and newer projects that are coming along as a result are being planned all electric. I think food preparation is the one remaining item that might not be in that category.
Even Todd
at the electric
at the neuropsychiatric hospital, which will be the
That's-
first electric hospital in California, we have food being the kitchen is electric as well.
Yes, and that's a really important part of our campus-wide decarbonization efforts, because we on campus are a very self-contained really mini village with a central plant that operates almost like a microgrid. And we are trying to decarbonize that energy generation as well as reduce the amount of energy that we're demanding overall from the utilities. So whenever we're working off campus, that can be a challenge because, especially historically, the level of electrical service might not be up to the requirements of current standards of the programs that are going in, and so frequently there's quite a bit of retrofitting that has been required for electrical services going in there. So let's see, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Robert asked if the slideshow will be available. Yes, my understanding is that it will. But Mark or Gabriel, I think you might be able to answer that more completely.
Yeah, I would defer to Mark on that, or Erica, right? When is this going to be available?
Later today. End of day.
That's correct.
Thank you. I do have a question if there's 1 minute left, 2 minutes left. Thank you so much. This has been a great presentation, Todd and John. What was interesting with regards to your Hayden Track project, UCLA is self-regulating, and you're independent of the local jurisdiction per se and a lot of the codes. I imagine you interface with a lot of the first responders, what have you, in your coordination. But relative to the surrounding community, when you go into doing different projects, the Westwood project and all that, I imagine there's some kind of community outreach component, or is that done through entitlement?
There very much is, and we through the medical center, they have a a public affairs division that does all of their public affairs in every direction. You can imagine a medical center would have questions about all kinds of things. And in this case, the neuropsychiatric hospital, there were and continue to be outreach efforts to the local community that can see the building, and then the larger local community that's interested in um, uh, met, services for homeless persons with mental illness and persons who are not homeless who have mental illness. And so all of the local government officials, the city electeds, the county electeds, the state electeds, they've all been briefed and brought up to speed, and in many cases have pledged time and effort and dollars from their respective corners of the political universe. The other thing I would say for the non-medical pieces is that not always, but almost always, the UCLA brand is a fairly easy talking point for, either a building that's already existed, like the Margot Levin Graduate Art Studios. It was just an enhancement of that. We were cleaning up. If you had remembered or went back in time on Google Earth, you can see it was it was an industrial area, and we had a capital I industrialized our little corner as we moved, as that area had sort of improved and upgraded its public face. I think the city was happy that we were doing the same. We also planted lots of trees and redid the parking, and that's the sort of thing we do. Also made the sidewalks accessible and safe. And in terms of the Nimoy, that theater had sat empty for almost a decade, a little less. And all the neighborhood wanted was for that to not be torn down and to not turn into, some sort of other kind of version of infill architecture. They love that theater. They love that it was in the neighborhood. They love that it brought the kinds of events that it did when it was a theater. And now that it's a performance theater, they're happy about that as well. The same is true for the Hammer Museum, the Rape Treatment Center. They built a building property line to property line in Santa Monica, taller than it was supposed to be, larger than it was supposed to be, providing services in a neighborhood. But, like I said, it's a the UCLA brand, and providing services to rape victims is an overall good. And so we do travel with that as part of the list of things that we discuss. And there are plenty of versions of which, we make adjustments or we modify what we're doing. But ultimately, I think the purpose of the building, the goal of the services inside to serve the students, faculty, staff, residents, neighbors, visitors, we want to maximize that, because as we often say, this is a 50-year building. We're not building a building that we're going to sell in 2 years, and then somebody's going to sell in 4 years, and somebody else is going to tear down in 6. These are buildings that last and provide those services in an ongoing way.
Great. I believe that bookends our presentation. Thank you again, Todd and John, for presenting today. And Mark will have the presentation available virtually, at least at some point, to all the attendees, correct?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll have the presentation available this afternoon. I'm going to upload it onto YouTube. We'll have a link on the webpage. Todd and John, if you could just send me your slides, I could add those as well for those who would love to revisit and those who weren't able to attend. We just want to thank Todd, John, Gabriel, and Justine. Again, everybody stay safe out there. We are working hard to try to figure out what the next steps are to rebuilding. We have a task force meeting tomorrow for the disaster relief. So check our website out if you'd like to join that. It is a web. I think we have about 400 people that are going to attend tomorrow at 4 p.m. So you can sign up online. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee, and appreciate the invitation.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.